In less than 24 hours from now, Russians will cast their final votes in an election. We know Vladimir Putin will win. Surprise, surprise. Well, yesterday, Russian citizens poured dye into ballot boxes, lit explosives, and attempted arson in sporadic acts of protest against this election. Several people have been arrested for vandalism at polling stations, according to Russian officials. The widow of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, Yulia Navalnaya, has also called on Russians to gather at polling stations tomorrow at noon to express their defiance by either not voting for Putin or destroying their ballots. Protesters would be carrying out Navalny's own plan that he announced 2 weeks before he died in prison. Now, regardless, we know how Russia works under Putin's rule. He is expected to cruise into a fifth term, remaining in power now for 3 decades, an easy election to win, given Putin's political foes are either dead, murdered, or exiled, or barred from running. And as Putin sees it, these elections are a chance to effectively get a stamp of approval on his war against Ukraine and send a strong message to the West that he is not going anywhere. Joining us now is Masha Gessen, staff writer at The New Yorker and the author of Surviving Autocracy. Masha, it's great to see you again. Thank you for coming on to discuss this. I want to start with your take on what we're seeing play out in Russia right now. Obviously, a sham election. There's no question that Putin will hold on to power for a 5th term. What is the significance, though, of the election this weekend of another 6 years of Vladimir Putin? Does it matter at all what the turnout looks like? Does it matter what kind of protests we see or expressions of defiance we see tomorrow?
Well, the turnout, no, it doesn't matter because they're going to doctor the turnout. We can't, at this point, they control the information sphere so completely that it's really a wonder that they bother with this at all, with any physical election, when they could just claim to have held an election. But protest does matter, not in the sense that it can unseat Putin. It obviously cannot, but it matters to people who want to protest, whose ability to act politically is so severely curtailed. For them to be brave enough to go to the polling stations at noon tomorrow, as Navalny asked them to, and to see other people who go to the polling stations at noon tomorrow, I think the importance of that, of just seeing one another and seeing that they're not alone, cannot be overestimated.
And I know that the rallies, as you mentioned, expected tomorrow, show that people are ready and willing to voice their dissent, despite Putin's attempt to completely silence critics in any way, shape, or form. And we saw a glimpse of that, if you will, with the way Russians paid tribute to Alexei Navalny and kind of publicly coming out and mourning his death in a way that people perhaps were not expecting it. What do you make of this state of Russian opposition now in the absence of Alexei Navalny? Do you agree with Alexei Navalny's widow that Putin's time of reckoning is coming soon?
Well, soon is a relative concept. I think what she is saying is that she is counting on still being alive when that time of reckoning comes. I think that's a great slogan. I don't know that I'm counting on still being alive when that time of reckoning comes. I don't think it's going to come in Putin's lifetime. And he's a 71-year-old man with the best healthcare in the world. I think we're stuck with him for a very, very long time, unless Russia is militarily defeated by Ukraine. But that's not a question for the Russian opposition. That's a question for the West, and in particular for the United States and its position on aiding Ukraine in its military effort.
I know that Vladimir Putin reiterated earlier this week that Russia is ready for nuclear war. We've heard a few times throughout the course of this invasion of Ukraine that type of rhetoric, but that doesn't mean that the world is headed towards nuclear war. It seems that Russia is still, like the rest of Europe, preparing for whatever comes out of Ukraine. But you've got Estonian officials warning earlier this week that Russia is restructuring and expanding its military in anticipation of a conflict with NATO, which just expanded with the addition of Sweden. And they're preparing for that in the next 10 years. Do you share that assessment that there is a collision course headed for Russia and NATO?
Look, you don't really have to be a military analyst to talk about this or to share this assessment. All you have to do is listen to Putin. He doesn't hide his plans. He has made it very clear that he sees himself as already being at war with NATO. He sees himself as fighting that war in Ukraine because he believes it's a proxy war with the United States and with NATO in general. And he has also made it very clear that he has his sights on Poland, right, which is a member of NATO.
Yeah, it's true. And I guess, and it's been a major concern of his ever since NATO began to expand eastward. There was an op-ed in The Guardian that argued while this election won't kickstart any change in Russia, defeat for Putin in Ukraine could. You just suggested that as well militarily. If Ukraine defeats Russia, that may be the end of Vladimir Putin. What do you make of that perspective on the importance of enabling Ukraine to win this war as a means to create dynamic change within Russia?
Well, I don't like that perspective, and I'll tell you why. Ukraine is fighting for its very existence. So the point of helping Ukraine is to support a country that is being subjected to a genocidal war of aggression, and it is the West's moral and legal responsibility, according to the Budapest Accords, to help Ukraine protect itself. So not for the purpose of unseating Putin, but for the purpose of doing what's right. But if Ukraine defeated Russia militarily, and that is only possible with significant and courageous amounts of Western aid, then yes, that would be the end of Putin's rule. And that's the only way in which Putin's regime is going to come to an end, other than Putin's actual death.
It'll be interesting to see if any Republicans on Capitol Hill who are holding up that support to Ukraine share that assessment as well. Masha Gessen, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Greatly appreciate your insights.
Thank you for having me.